Okay, let's just dive right in. I want you to picture a scene. Imagine a massive crowd, a sea of people, just surging and packed so tightly that they're literally tripping over each other, and they're all pressing in just to hear one man speak. The energy is just electric. And right into this chaos, Jesus starts to teach. But this isn't some dry lecture. It's more like a masterclass in how to actually live, told through a series of unforgettable scenes. And scene one? It kicks off with this really cryptic warning about something that's hidden in plain sight.
All right, so verse 1. He says, beware of the leaven. Now, leaven is just yeast. So to really lock this in your mind, imagine you're baking bread. You take just a tiny little pinch of yeast and you knead it into this huge lump of dough. You can't even see it anymore, right? But that tiny, hidden ingredient is now silently at work, puffing up the entire loaf, changing it completely from the inside out. Jesus is saying hypocrisy is exactly like that. It's that small, secret performance that invisibly inflates your ego and changes the very substance of who you are.
So this whole idea about what's hidden, well, it leads directly into his first major lesson. In a world that absolutely loves a good performance, Jesus basically promises that every single mask is going to come off eventually.
Okay, let's really build the scene here for verses 2 and 3. Picture a dark stone room, completely sealed shut. There are two people huddled in a corner, and they're whispering a secret they think nobody will ever know. Now, I want you to watch that whisper as it leaves their lips, not as sound, but as this visible wisp of smoke. See it slide right under the door, float through the city streets, and spiral all the way up to the highest sun-baked rooftop. And then, boom, it billows out like a trumpet blast for the whole town to hear. The point is just so powerful and unforgettable. There are no truly secret lives. Authenticity isn't just a good idea, it's inevitable.
So after addressing the crowd, the focus kind of zooms in. He looks his closest followers right in the eye, and the topic gets really personal. He's about to tackle one of the biggest human struggles there is, fear. But he's not just going to talk about it. He's going to completely recalibrate what or who is truly worthy of our fear.
So in verses 4 and 5, he lays out this incredibly stark choice. Imagine there are two doors. Behind door number 1 is everything you're afraid people can do to you. Yeah, it's loud, it's painful, but it's a scene that eventually ends. The door closes. But behind door number 2, that's the ultimate eternal reality. Jesus is asking this profound question. Why on earth would you give the ultimate fear of your heart to a temporary power? He's basically redirecting our fear toward the only one with any eternal authority. And to replace that fear, he paints this picture of incredible value. This is verse 6. Visualize a loud, dusty marketplace. You've got a vendor selling these tiny little birds, sparrows, for maybe a couple of copper coins. I mean, they're the cheapest thing you can buy, practically worthless. Now, see one of those sparrows in flight, and then, in a blink, it falls to the ground. In all the chaos of the market, nobody notices. But then, the whole scene freezes, and a single ray of light lands on that tiny bird. God noticed. It was not forgotten.
And then in verse 7, he makes it intensely personal. He says, look, if God remembers a bird that's worth less than a penny, what about you? See this number, 150,000. Picture a human head of hair, and just imagine the impossible task of counting every single one of those strands. Jesus says God knows that exact number for you right this second. That's the level of ridiculously detailed, personal care he has for you. You, he says, are worth more than a whole flock of sparrows.
And then, right in the middle of this profound listen, bam, an interruption. A guy shouts from the crowd. He doesn't have a question about God, oh no, he's asking about his inheritance. He wants Jesus to be his lawyer. And this interruption, this raw display of greed, becomes the perfect setup for one of the most cinematic parables in the entire Bible. So the story kicks off. Verse 17. We meet this rich man who's just had a fantastic year. I mean, his harvest is overflowing. But instead of a scene of celebration, we see him pacing around at night, wringing his hands. His first feeling isn't gratitude, it's anxiety. Picture his problem. It's not empty barns, it's piles of grain so high he can't even see over them. He is literally being suffocated by his own abundance.
Now watch his solution unfold. This is verse 18. He snaps his fingers, and in his mind you can just see the blueprints appear. He's sketching it all out. I will tear down my barns, and I will build bigger barns, and I will store all my grain and my goods.
The words I and my just echo like hammer blows as he builds this monument to himself, totally convinced that a bigger storage unit is the answer to his soul's deep anxiety.
And now we get to the final scene of his master plan, from verse 19. The massive new barns are built, he's leaning back in a comfortable chair, maybe a glass of wine in his hand, and he's actually talking to himself, giving a toast to his own soul. You did it, he's thinking. You're set for life. The game is won. He believes he has single-handedly bought himself a future of perfect ease. The illusion of control is absolutely complete. And then, verse 20. A voice from heaven cuts through his little celebration like a crack of thunder. Just 2 words shatter the whole scene. You fool. Imagine the wine glass just slipping from his hand. This very night, the voice continues, your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And the camera just pulls back, showing his giant new barns for what they really are, just a tomb for his treasure. Wow. So if storing up treasure leads to foolishness and anxiety, what's the alternative? Jesus immediately pivots. He pulls us out of that dark, claustrophobic story of the fool and into an open, freeing lesson from the natural world. It's like a breath of fresh air.
Verse 24, and what a contrast. The fool was obsessed with his barns. Jesus says, just look up. Picture a sleek black raven just effortlessly riding the wind. It has no schedule, no bank account, no storage unit. It's not worried about its retirement plan. It just flies, and it gets fed. It lives in this state of what you could call provided for freedom.
But it's not just about basic survival, it's about splendor. In verse 27, I want you to imagine a split screen. On the left side, you've got King Solomon, the richest king who ever lived, just draped in layers of purple silk and heavy gold. On the right side, a single wildflower in a field, just perfect in its simplicity. And Jesus points to the flower and says that Solomon, in all his man-made glory, was never dressed as beautifully as this.
All of this, the ravens, the lilies, it's all building to this core principle in verse 34. Let's make this a physical image. Picture your heart. Now picture a chain running from your heart directly to a heavy treasure chest. That chest is whatever you value most in this world. Now try to move the chest. See? Your heart gets dragged right along with it. It's like a law of spiritual physics. Your heart will always, always follow your treasure. You get to choose the treasure, but you don't get to choose where your heart goes. You see, understanding where your treasure is changes everything. It changes your whole posture from this anxious striving to an active, hopeful waiting. And this next scene is all about how to live in that state of constant, positive expectation. In verses 35 and 36, Jesus paints this picture of a servant waiting for their master to come back from a wedding. Let's build this image piece by piece. First, see the servant tuck his long robes into his belt so he can run at a moment's notice. He's ready for action. Second, see him check the oil in his lamp, making sure its flame is burning bright against the night. He's staying alert. And third, see him standing right by the door, listening intently. He's ready to open it instantly. That right there is the posture of readiness.
And here in verse 40 is the big why. The driving force behind all of this is the element of surprise. The master isn't on a schedule. He's going to show up at the most unexpected hour. So the only way to prepare for a surprise arrival is to just always be prepared. You have to live in that at-the-door, lamp-burning state of mind.
And now we come to the final act of this masterclass. Jesus brings all these lessons home with one last really urgent challenge. It's about moving from just listening to actually seeing, from theory to action, and doing it right now.
He points out this stunning contradiction in verses 54 to 56. Picture a farmer squinting at a cloud in the west and saying, "Yep, a storm's coming." He can read the sky perfectly. Then show that same exact man looking completely baffled by the obvious spiritual events happening right in front of his face. Jesus essentially asks, "You're expert meteorologists for tomorrow's weather, but you can't read the signs of this present, critical moment?"
He ends with this unforgettable image of urgency in verses 58 and 59. Picture 2 men walking quickly down a path. One is your accuser, and he's dragging you to see the judge. The scene is tense, right? Jesus says the time to make things right is now, on the path, because once you get to that courthouse, it's too late. The verdict is coming down. He's showing us that our lives have that exact same on-the-way-to-court urgency. And that's how the chapter ends. The story is over, and the camera turns directly to you. The
The walk to the courthouse has begun for all of us. So looking at your own life, your relationships, your accounts with God, what needs to be settled right now on the way?